Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back. This is going to be a new type of what if, or new anime, depending on how you want to look at it. Because I've done this kind of domination or dominatrix kind of what if before, but that was with Naruto. So this is going to be my first My Hero Academia what if. So yeah, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe because, completely new fan base with the new, anime that we're going into. And this video is actually going to have a like goal. I haven't really done that in a while, but I figured, hey, I might as well get back into it just so, because why not? That way I know if people actually want to see more of that video and different things like that. So the like goal on this video for part 2 to come out is going to be 200 likes, and with that being said, let's get started. This story is going to start at the literal exact date and time and everything like that Bakugo would normally unlock his quirk. So as he's basically awakening his quirk, and the little explosions are coming off of his fingertips, they're really weak explosions, his body starts morphing into something different, something else, and he's like, what the no? What is happening? As his chest starts to grow and basically just giving him more feminine features, and all of a sudden he looks down and he's like, I'm a girl. What the hell just happened? Why am I a girl? And at the same time that this is happening to Bakugo, Deku is also unlocking his quirk, or awakening his quirk. And there's these weird rods that are like a little rubbery texture, are forming out of his hands. They're relatively small, and he can't really control them too much, not really be able to manipulate them at all. But these weird rubbery textured rods are forming out of his hands in these bright colors, and he's wondering exactly what this is. So that's just the awakening. He's going to have a lot more abilities, but that's just going to be what it originally is. So you might be wondering, the hell just happened to Bakugo? Well, Deku didn't realize, and nobody else realized, but Deku ended up turning Bakugo into a girl. So say hi to female Bakugo, guys. So Bakugo's a girl now. And immediately, basically, all the things change about her because, there's a lot of differences in terms of personality and physical features that are made when you transform from a guy into a girl. So immediately he changes into something similar to his mother's personality, but which really, to be honest, isn't too much of a difference, but he's just a tiny bit nicer. We're just gonna go with that. He's not quite as arrogant about his quirk anymore, so, or at least in the future, she is not going to be quite as arrogant about her quirk. So that, things go on normally. Nobody knows exactly what Deku's quirk exactly is, but they go and get it tested by the quirk doctor. And during the tests, the quirk doctor notices a few different things about his quirk. For one, all the things that he can summon generally have something to do with BDSM, and specifically somebody trying to dominate another person. So he notices this, and he notices that, Deku can, form different things out of his hands, and basically any part of his body, like chains and whips, and, different types of leather, along with those weird types of rubbery plastic texture things that are coming out of his hand that are generally always really bright and vibrant colors. And he notices what these are, the second he sees them. He's just like, what should we call this quirk? And he's deciding between a few things, and he pretty much is like, okay, do I call it the BDSM quirk or the Dominatrix quirk? And eventually he comes to the conclusion that he's just going to call it the Dominatrix quirk. So, wabambo, we have a Dominatrix quirk with Deku. So, Deku's really innocent. At least from a young age, he's generally pretty innocent with the way he's growing up and different things like that. But the quirk starts slowly changing his personality into something that's more, not necessarily perverted, but he starts getting those ideas a little bit sooner than what most people do. And he starts getting these ideas in order to try to be able to, have some fun time, I guess you could say, with other people around him. And he starts doing that with the female Bakugo. No, I'm kidding. With female Bakugo. So, with that, he starts, forming these different tools. Now that he figured out exactly what they were, when he decided he wanted to go onto the interweb, what is an interweb? I don't know. The internet. And he figured out exactly what these things that he's forming are, with chains and whips and, the rubbery, plastic, colorful things. Because I can't say the actual name of them. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? Like, come on, you gotta know exactly what I'm talking about here. So, he knows exactly what everything is now, and he starts developing his abilities for a more, probably what they're actually made for in terms of that field of, he's not exactly looking for hero work with his abilities that he's developing now. Like, when he first started, he was developing them in, like, different fighting styles and different things like that. And obviously he's going to be a lot stronger just because, having a quirk, especially one that's based around, like, domination, would be pretty freaking powerful. But he didn't develop it for that long in terms of fighting capabilities. Like, almost immediately, he started thinking about more sexual things, I guess you could say. So, going on the internet, he figures out all these different things that he can do with his quirk, and he starts testing them on Bakugo. Now, this does not mean that they're, like, boning or anything like that. He's just... he's just, like, with, like, whips and different things like that, testing exactly what... And, okay, how would you feel about... Would Bakugo be a sub? We don't know. I'm not getting into that right now because they're like 9 years old. So they don't do anything, but whatever. We're moving on. So they're graduating from middle school, and Deku is obviously a lot more powerful. He's a bit more muscular, and he's in general like a pretty smart kid because, domination, he's got to be smart, strong, fast, literally everything. He's just going to be an all-around much more all-around person, I guess you could say. So he's a lot stronger in basically every field of basically imaginable. So with that, he would obviously be still trying to get into UA, because I don't see why him wanting to do stuff with girls. It would basically make him like a Mineta. So, he still wants to go into UA because be a hero for the chicks. So, he also wants to be a hero for, hero reasons. But, that's kind of like in the back burner of his mind right now. But whatever. So they are basically graduating from the middle school. The middle school teacher is asking exactly what everybody wants to do, but then he's just like, who the hell am I kidding? You all want to be heroes anyway, before throwing all the papers everywhere. Then he looks at young female Bakugo, and he's still a little bit weirded out by the change. And he basically just says that she and Deku were trying to get into UA. Bakugo doesn't do the thing that he would normally do because it's, she is a little bit different this time. She doesn't, force herself or not force herself, but, basically make it known that she's better than everybody there because she knows that Deku is actually quite a bit stronger than her. So, she doesn't do that. She's a little bit more... not selfish, I guess you could say. But, she knows her own abilities are not equal to that of Deku, so she isn't quite as, I'm better than everybody else. So, they graduate from middle school, and Deku is walking home from, his class. And this is where he's walking under the bridge, because he decided he was going to take a shortcut just like before. But this time it's a little bit different in terms of what he's going to do with, his quirk, because he actually has one this time. So when the sludge villain jumps out and tries to grab him, Deku dodges out of the way pretty easily, and he forms a few, whips and chains out of himself and tries to tie the sludge villain up. But the sludge villain just kind of, falls through it, because, again, he's kind of like a slime weird thing, so he can just kind of, fall through it, and Deku's like, wait, what? And he forms some, swords out of the rubbery stuff, and now he has a lot more, better ability to manipulate them, and, say he wanted to harden them, he could do that. He couldn't make it quite as hard as, steel or something like that, but he could make it, pretty up. It's really hard. So he tries to basically cut up the sludge villain. Obviously, it doesn't work either. He's trying to figure it out how to actually be able to do anything about the sludge villain, but his quirk really just didn't allow him to do anything about it. So, eventually, when he touches the sludge villain, he discovers that he has a different ability that he didn't even know about. When he actually touches the sludge, it kind of just immediately retraced back its steps a little bit. It kind of backed up a little bit. And Deku's like, wait, what? What's this? Why did it just back up? And the thing he just did was basically make the sludge villain not more submissive. So, not in, the sexual way, at least not with the sludge villain, but, it immediately just, like, backed off from the fight, thinking that, Deku's too powerful for it. So this is where Deku's like, wait, what did I just... Before All Might shows up, I am here, and Detroit smashing the sludge villain. So he puts the sludge villain into a bottle, and Deku asks a few questions, but it isn't as, like, as in the original, because he's not like, I'm a quirkless kid, can I still become a hero? He knows he can become a hero with the quirk he has, because, it's pretty powerful. So All Might's like, would you like me to sign your notebook? And Deku's like, yeah, sure, why not? He isn't, like, fanboying over him or anything, but he's like, yeah, that's pretty dope. I'll take an autograph, that's pretty cool. So then All Might jumps away, because again, his time limit is pretty much about to run out, but Deku doesn't grab onto his leg, so that doesn't actually happen. And All Might also doesn't see Deku as, like, the perfect candidate for All for One, or One for All, because he can sense the different he can't sense the emotions, but he can tell exactly what his quirk was after a while of seeing him use it. So with that, he's like, that kid, at least not yet, is not going to be a great successor for my quirk. So he decides not to give it to him. So the few months before the UA entrance exams would begin, and Deku and Bakugo would begin training with each other. They train with each other just because they're, like, the two strongest people that each of them know that are both trying to get into the same school. And Bakugo isn't as, bad or arrogant, I guess you could say, as she was in the original. So they begin training together, and they start developing actual feelings for each other, because I'm going to say that when Deku switched the genders of Bakugo, obviously Bakugo does not know that happened at this point, but she also developed, like, feelings that most females have. I'm not saying all females, like guys and stuff like that, but I'm going to say, like, she developed feelings towards Deku because of the fact that he changed her. So it's kind of like, since he was the one that changed her, she starts developing feelings towards him, basically completely it wouldn't be naturally, it'd be completely unnatural, but she starts developing those feelings. They're kind of, like, forced upon, but Deku doesn't really realize that was his doing that had happened in the first place. And he doesn't realize that he can also control the fact that if he wants them to, like him or anything like that. Like, he can make them, like, completely hate him, or he can make them, like, groveling at his feet, like, give me your penis, senpai, kind of a thing. Like, he doesn't realize that he can do that. So he's like, huh, she likes me. Because he can tell, because he's a cultured man, I guess you could say. So he notices that pretty immediately, and he's just like, interesting. He starts noticing more of the features of the female Bakugo, because he just kind of saw her as more like a friend and training partner up until this point. But then, as she started aging and her body started maturing and, different things like that, Deku's kind of like, damn, she's pretty freaking hot. And he's like, interesting. So they start developing these feelings towards each other. So, yeah, you guys know exactly where I'm going with the female Bakugo, do you not? Maybe I'll have it... Oh, well, obviously, I'm going to have him, like, not just end up with one person, but that's going to be, like, the first little, like, roundabout way, I guess you could say. But whatever. So they start developing these feelings towards each other, but they don't end up, like, dating or anything like that, because they still both have, like, an absolute shitload of pride, especially Bakugo. Bakugo would never let herself drop to that. Like, she's not going to admit that she likes Deku. Deku would have to admit it to her, but Deku doesn't want to because, he has a lot of pride, too. So he thinks that maybe he can do something with his quirk eventually, maybe once he learns how to control it a little bit more, considering, like, he's tampered with some of the different abilities and different things like that, and he notices that if he touches people, he can kind of, like, change their emotions somewhat. So while they're training one day, he decides he's going to test that. So while they're training, Deku would land a punch on female Bakugo, and immediately Deku can see the change. Bakugo, like, he didn't want it to be, like, absurdly obvious, so he just kind of made it like, he's like, I'm going to double the emotions at first, that she feels like good things towards me. And he does that after, like, punching her, and he can immediately sense the change. The punches start weakening a little bit, as Bakugo doesn't really want to hurt him as much. And Deku notices that. She's like, interesting. Like, he can sense the more, like, not necessarily submissive nature, just, like, the amount that, like, she cares for him a lot more. And he can tell that. So he's like, what if I do it even more? And then eventually, after, their fight continues on, Bakugo is basically just tapping him. And because, like, the basically immense amount of emotions that she's feeling for him doesn't even, like, she can't hit him without, like, feeling absurdly bad about it. So then Deku's just like, okay, and what if I just turn it up, like, all the way? And he basically uses, like, the maximum extent of his abilities and just cranks the little lever up that he has inside of his brain to, like, make people like him and different stuff like that. This is just him testing his quirk at this point. So he's like, okay, and what if I do this? As he cranks the like, again, the lever is, like, very, it's not actually there. He doesn't have a lever that he's pulling or anything. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of like the scale of which he can turn it. And right now it's about a little over halfway. He cranks it up all the way, and Bakugo immediately starts, like, remember how I said, like, groveling at the person's feet? Like, give me your penis, senpai? It's not that bad, but, like, it's pretty much at that point. She's, like, not, like, she's literally shaking at the legs at this point, and Deku's like, really? Interesting. Like, he didn't realize he could do this. He didn't realize he had the immense amount of power to do that. And he's like, interesting. I can really use this to my advantage. He cranks it back down to what it was originally, not really wanting to mess with his friend. He was gonna, he wanted to test it, but he didn't want to, like, permanently make Bakugo, like, have those, like, abnormally high amount of feelings for him. So he cranked it back down to what it was originally, where she just had, like, a small crush on him. And Bakugo's like, the fuck was that? What? And Deku's just like, I was testing my quirk, and he kind of explains what he was doing and how he can, like, toy with or not toy, but, like, mess with emotions and different things like that. And Bakugo's pissed. Like, anybody would be pissed at that, because, like, Deku just completely, like, changed her emotions about basically how she felt. And she's obviously pissed, but Deku's like, hey, I turned you back down to what you were originally. And she's like, fine, whatever, just don't do it again with me. And Deku's like, okay, whatever, I won't. So they would continue on with their training, with Deku stopping that type of, training with his quirk and just training his abilities in, like, actual combat styles this time. And they're still developing their feelings towards one another, but that isn't going to show effect, at least not yet. So they then go to the UA entrance exams. It's been, I'm pretty sure it was 4 months that they had to train, and the beach never really got cleared. All Might probably chose, why can't I remember the guy's name right now? Mirio to be his successor, and he's like, okay, clear this beach, and, different things like that. So Mirio would become the successor for One for All, but he's not honestly going to be that important, obviously, because, come on. Deku's going to be much more powerful than him, like, obviously. So, with that happening, they decide, like, okay, we're going to get ready for the exams, and they begin studying and different things like that for the written part of the exams. Obviously, Deku would do really well in the written part, and he would finish before basically anybody else. He would be pretty much there at around the same time as somebody like Ida or somebody like that. So they start talking to each other a little bit, and Ida, he likes him a little bit more than what he did in the original, at least at first, just because he's a little bit, like, he's a lot quieter. He doesn't, like, he kind of minds his own business. So he just like, whatever, I don't really need to bother this kid right now. So everybody would get there, and Professor Mike, I think, he would begin explaining exactly what the robots were, like the 1 point, 2 point, 3 pointer robots, and then he explains the 0 pointer robot. He doesn't explain anything about the rescue points or anything like that, just like in the original, and they then start the actual entrance exams, or the practical exams, sorry, not just the entrance exams, that kind of already started. So Deku would basically be ready to run in, and everybody would be like, there's no countdown to, hero or villain, whatever you want to call it. And everybody would run in, and people would begin destroying robots, with Deku amassing massive amount of points. Because, again, he can harden his, swords and different things like that, as well as, like, forming it around different parts of his body, giving him sort of a really bright suit of armor that's about as powerful as steel. So he can do that, and he just smashes these robots. With his enhanced physical strength, he could pretty easily pick up, like, an absolutely massive, I need to come up with a name for the, they're dildos, but I need a new name for it, because I can't just be like, saying that word a lot because YouTube doesn't exactly appreciate that. I'm just gonna call them rods. He can pick up he can basically use these massive rods that are like hundreds of pounds and just slam them into the robots. So he pretty easily destroys like massive amounts of them. And that's where I'm gonna leave this part off because 20 minutes is a long enough freaking video for me. So peace out. Like I said in the beginning, 200 likes and you'll get a next part. Peace out. Bye.